What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Okay, I wasn't going to do another video today, but something just came up. I had Mr. David Hayth contacting me because Ross Coulthart just appeared on an Australian podcast. The name of the podcast is UFOZ, something like that. And Ross gave a lengthy interview. They talked about many different topics, but the one that stood out in the internet in general and in ufology is a topic that I'm a little familiar with because I did a report last year about the James Webb Space Telescope and how Lou Elizondo and Matt Ford decided to hint at something that was allegedly going to happen. And that story, I had been following it for a few months by the time that happened. And there's always a lot of different conflicting information about it. What I reported was that there were briefings to staffers in Congress in unclassified settings about this alleged object that was allegedly coming towards here and that it was self-correcting whenever it deviated from the path that it had that was supposedly coming towards here. I did not say that that was true. I said that that was being talked about in Congress, which is true. And now I've been digging, I've been doing my investigations, and those briefings did happen. And there was at least three people doing them, and people that should know about this if it's indeed happening. What I managed to get in terms of new information also is that the data is raw, what they have about this. So it is impossible to know whether something is going to happen or not, just out of raw data. But a lot of people have been coming forward and making up their own different interpretations of this data. So the latest statement about this alleged event that may or may not happen in 2027, 2034, 2029. I keep hearing different dates as well. And the latest statement came from Ross Coulthart. And I'm going to show you guys what he said on this show. So here it is.
That leads me to ask, there's been so much discussion of this date, 2027, and where the source of the information comes from, we don't know. But there have been some prominent spokespeople who have been involved with the UFO topic that have spoken about this date. Do you know if there's any validity to that source of that information? And if so, what is your interpretation of that date, if it means anything?
There's certainly something going to happen in 2027, and I don't know what it is.
Okay.
I've also heard 2034.
Ross does seem kind of fed up with that because I'm sure that just as I've encountered, nobody has been completely clear about that information that they have. But yeah, they do sound serious, and but they just go, I can't really tell you. And that's what I find really frustrating when I start asking this, because just recently I was talking to one of these people and they were like, no, but I saw data that makes me believe that something is definitely there. And I'm like, yeah, but what is it? I better not say it. And it's like, come on, dude. I think that the people deserve to know if something like that could happen. And I really find it really frustrating and really disappointing when these people go like, yeah, hint at it, and then go like, no, but I can't tell you exactly what it is. It's just dumb. And from what I've gathered, it is data, but it is raw. So it's impossible to predict what's going to happen. Now listen to what Ross tells you here.
And I've also heard other dates, much later. But depends who you talk to. Some people say it's a pole reversal. Some people say it's an asteroid hitting the planet. Some people say it's AI reaching quantum, and then all of a sudden we lose the capacity to have control of our own computer systems. I have no idea. What I am aware of is that everybody's telling me we're on borrowed time. And I cannot begin to emphasize how serious a look I get when I say to people who are confiding in me, what's the timescale on this? and they're urging me to be urgent. They're saying to me, people need the right to know this. They have a right to know this. And I'm going, well, what are we talking about? And I feel like shaking these people and saying, for God's sake, just bloody tell me. And they are all constrained by their national security oaths. They want the public to know this. And this is why the president, President Trump, has a unique ability to literally flick a switch and force this to be revealed. And
That's true. He does, because it is kind of an executive order if it happens, if something like that would be announced. But I also wanted to talk to you guys about another possibility that I've heard that Ross didn't mention here. And I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but if you guys have been looking at everything that's been written over the last decade or so about these topics, there's one specific set of books that do point towards something potentially being a possibility, which is, and I'm sorry to say this, but it is something that is being taken seriously and is being talked about, some sort of an invasion or something. And obviously, this is something that I take with a huge grain of salt, but the Secret Machines books of Gods, Man, and War do talk about this. And it's really funny that Ross just came out saying this, and James Iandoli, who's a friend of mine, a friend of the show, came out on his show, making something happen that I really didn't imagine it would happen so quickly and unexpectedly. He managed to sit down with Jim Semivan from the CIA and Peter Levenda, the author of Secret Machines, alongside Tom DeLonge. Tom has been MIA, basically only doing podcasts on To the Stars Media, but Peter Levenda was already a guest on my show, and he constantly talks to James, for example, and he talks about this on their latest show.
Have this concept of war, right? But potentially, in the book you guys mentioned, you have to look at it from the perspective of an alien invasion, right? And if that were true, we're basically sitting on our hands, no? Or as a civilization, we're just sitting on our hands and not doing anything about anything.
Well, Peter, there's another tough question for you.
Thanks a lot, Jim. You set me up with this whole thing. Now I got to.
I know we did beforehand, right?
Thanks a lot. If we think in terms of an alien invasion, which I think we have to look at the worst case scenario, right? I mean, and that's what the government has to do, right? The military has to do this. Military is always thinking of worst case scenario. They war game this stuff, right? But how do you war game something with the phenomenon, right? When we have no freaking clue what we're talking about in terms of capabilities or intention or even identity, right? So, if you see movies, and we mentioned this in war, movies like Independence Day, right? Independence Day, was great. We defeated the aliens. We beat them at their own game. Seriously? Really? They're not coming back, maybe?
And that is just presuming too much. We don't even know what these things are. We don't even know if they have morals, ethics, you name it. It's impossible right now. And in my previous video, I told you that what I think, that this phenomenon seems to be real, but it's impossible to know what it is. And that can be frustrating. And I think that Ross didn't mention this aspect, probably on purpose, because he just doesn't want to put attention to it. But there's already a lot of people talking about it, i.e. Mr. Levenda here.
Force, because we don't know where they came from. We don't know where their home base is. We don't know what raw materials they need to function. We don't know if they eat, drink, or sleep. We've got no data on this. How do you defend yourself against an entity that's coming at you from God knows where, God knows when, with God knows what resources? So I don't think we're sitting on our hands. I think, I don't want to put words in Jim's mouth, but I don't think we're sitting on our hands. I think people are doing what they can to try to figure out what this is. but they're hamstrung. I mean, their hands are tied because we have too much cultural crap to deal with first before we can clear-eyed look at what the implications are of this, right? We're making a lot of assumptions. An American mentality, American military or intelligence mentality is going to be somewhat similar to that of, let's say, the Russians or the Chinese in certain ways. But in certain other ways, they won't be. There's cultural differences with how we approach the phenomenon. As I said, there are, indigenous peoples all around the world who are pretty comfortable with it, right? And don't regard it as an invading force. They regard it as a spiritual force, maybe as something that comes in and out, that maybe there are spirits they have to appease in some way. But they've worked out a plan and they've worked out a system for dealing with it. And it seems to work for them. We don't have a system for dealing with this because we're thinking really differently just as Americans ourselves. We have this idea that we created this country, we kicked out the British, we kicked out eventually the French, we kicked out everybody, we kicked out the American Indians. We did all of this stuff, and we have our Constitution. We have this. We have a how shall I put it? A kind of movie that goes on in our heads about who we are and what our country is and what the defenses of this country require and all the rest of it. And then you've got the entity, you've got this NHI, you've got whatever the phenomenon is showing up and saying, "Oh yeah, really? So seriously?" And they're questioning every single aspect of who we are. Their mere existence questions every single aspect of who we are. Language, culture, raw material need, water, air, language, everything is being questioned. Politics, non-existent, right? We're looking at a phenomenon that we have no clue if there's a political structure behind them. We don't know if this is just like an ant colony, right? Or like a beehive, a situation that we're looking at. Maybe there's a queen bee somewhere. Maybe all the phenomenon are just individual worker bees. We have no way of knowing it. We have all kinds of, like I just did, we come up with ideas, with similes, with metaphors, and we're trying to figure out, what this is, but we're coming up with stuff based on our own experience of the world. Now we have to come up with something which is based on an experience of another world. And that's what's really freaky. How do we defend ourselves against that?
So that's the conundrum right there. And I don't know either what could happen or couldn't happen whenever those dates come. I can tell you that, for example, Fepo from Podcast Paranormal, who was my guest, and I was his guest too, yesterday he had a live stream where he kept getting these precognitive kind of prophecies or predictions from people going to him on his channel. Right after I was on his channel, I got an email from someone too who kept telling me that something was going to happen on the 29th, meaning today. And that's exactly what I mean. Fepo understands this, and he made a live stream talking about the alleged end of the world. And he explained that this has been happening for generations now. People think that they receive precognitive dreams, predictions, and they develop this fear, and they pass this fear on to other people because they can't really bear the fear. And eventually everything ends, right? For someone who, for example, passes on. That's what I think end of the world is for a person. Asteroids have been hitting Earth forever. That's inevitable in many cases. Volcanoes are inevitable. Earthquakes are inevitable. But trying to predict something like that is impossible. It's just as simple as that. And even if there is really compelling raw data, it is pretty irresponsible to just tease stuff like that. If you're not going to tell the people what you know and the data that you have, you shouldn't even mention it because it's impossible to know what it is. And yeah, this is what gives a lot of these people that make predictions leeway to talk about this and to propose their own hypotheses. And that's where we get all the fear mongering, and it's something that we can't afford to have. especially now, because there's a lot of division in the world right now, and we have a lot of stuff to deal with. And just another doomer prediction is not going to work. It's going to make things even worse than they are. So, in my opinion, yeah, if you guys from the military or the intelligence community or Congress or the Senate have information about this, you have to tell the people if you think it's actually something that we can act upon. If it's just raw data, as I've been hearing, I don't think we should even bring it up because probably nothing is going to happen. But that's just my opinion, though. It's possible that I'm wrong and that there is something, I don't know. I don't even know if it's James Webb or some other type of system that they may have. Scientists right now are already talking about faster than light communication and other types of edge technology. Dr. Ana Brady Estevez has been inviting scientists to talk about this openly in really public settings. So, based on what I've heard recently, I don't know anymore if there is some kind of a system that can already detect something that far like that, or if James Webb itself has some kind of classified setting, because I know they do, but we don't know what they're doing with that classified parts of the James Webb Space Telescope. We have no clue. So, yeah, I share the frustration that Ross has, but I also see that people who should be in the know, like Semivan, like Levenda, who are clearly part of this inner circle of people that should know about this stuff, they do send a message through their writing and through podcasts and through their public appearances, little by little, trying to tell us something. What do you think it is? Let me know in the comments. And what do you think about this overall prediction? Do you think it has something to it? Do you think it doesn't? What do you think the raw data could be? It's hard to tell for me. So I am reporting on this because it does tie into the stuff that I've already reported before. And I think it was a pretty interesting coincidence that Ross talked about this and it was published today. And Lavenda talked about the potential of an invasion. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm all ears, I'm all eyes, and I'll be responding to as much as I can. If you like the content you see, I'm going to ask you to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you can get notified when a new video drops. If you only do that, it only takes you a few seconds, and it's what helps this channel the most. So thank you. But if you want to help us keep the lights on or support us in other ways, there are a few links in the description. You can also become a member, or you can support us on the KGRA website. Anything you choose to do is always appreciated. So thank you. That's it for me today on this video, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Remember, stay curious and inquisitive, always. And have fun at Contact in the Desert, folks. I'll be looking from a distance. Bye.